£34,000, but there are means by which truckers can gain permits to travel over those roads, which haven't been used or followed in many years. Anyway, in particular, Bucks Mills Road is seeing a good deal of heavy truck traffic related to commercial activities. But even beyond that, the current policy allows for that type of heavy truck traffic if it's going to a residential property. And there's no, it doesn't say it has to be a residential property in Bucksport. It just says that it has to be a residential property. So Bucks Mills is with the advent of more commercial activity, becoming a throughway, so to speak, to some of these pits and back. Chief Gagan and I have had this conversation, and Mrs. Johnson is here. She lives on Bucks Mills, and the amount of heavy truck traffic is of concern. And our current regulation also allows a trucking company to get a permit if they provide proof that damages will be taken care of if they damage the road. The problem then becomes if you have multiple entities using it, how do you determine who did what, and how do we manage that? And as I said, the policy, from what I understand, was put in place back when 395 was being constructed and there was considerable hauling, and I think in the past couple of years we've gone from this and it's now on the increase again because of all of the commercial activity that's going on and what's being hauled out from pits that allows people to get where they want to go more quickly. Mrs. Johnson is here. I'm sure she has information and that she wants to share, and Chief Gagan is here and he has some thoughts on this also.
Hi, I live out on Bucks Mills Road. I'm the last house at the end of the road. The town ordinance right now in section 10-402, number F, includes Bucks Mills Road from the intersection east of the Bucksport Road to the intersection of Millvale Road and Central Street. And it reads that vehicles registered in excess of 34,000 pounds are prohibited on the following roads. And that's the way it reads. They're prohibited on those roads. 34,000 pounds. I also printed out from the state of Maine this weight of the trucks by axle, and they far exceed that limit. That's like a 2-axle, and these are 4-axle trucks. So there's an exemption. The exemption states that a permit can be given by the town manager. Any truck registered within the state limits, which has been issued a permit by the town manager for special circumstances, a bond payable to the town of Bucksport in the amount of $10,000 per mile may be required to cover the costs of the damage that may occur. If a bond is required, an inspection and documentation of the existing road condition must be performed prior to the issuance of the permit, and all costs associated with the permit shall be paid by the permittee. So they have to pay to have that inspection. My concern is that those roads weren't built for that kind of traffic. That's a peat bog out there. And the road's just been done, and now it's being ripped up again. We're going to be the ones that pay for it. When I came to Bucksport and looked for houses, I looked on 46. The houses were closed. We had to park on the road. The realtor said to me, "Be careful, it's a state highway. A lot of trucks go down this road." So I thought about it. I don't want to live on a state highway. Now I'm on a state highway because the trucks are running. Depends on what's going on. Snow's Corner, when they built that, they were running trucks every half hour up and down that road. and it's loud. They were using their J brakes. That got taken care of. But they weren't supposed to be on the road anyway, so I don't even know why it was issued. But anyway, I think that we should change it to just say that they're prohibited and leave it at that. Let them go on 46 and 15 and stay off of the residential road at Bucks Mills Road.
Is there a size truck that they could use that would fall under 34,000?
Not that they're going to haul gravel with, or these are primarily hauling out of the pits, right? If Chief Gagan is here, that has more. He can share with you some of his concerns about this too.
And so it's basically from the Orrington line.
There's a list in the town ordinance of what roads are prohibited on.
Yeah.
Russell Hill Road, Millvale Road from the intersection of the Charlie Cole Road to the intersection of Silver Lake Road, Hinks Road, Silver Lake Road, Mast Hill Road from the intersection of the Upper Falls Road to the intersection of the Dead River Road, Town Farm Road, Broadway from the intersection of Nicholson Avenue to the intersection of Central Street, and then the Bucks Mills that I read.
Okay, and Bucks Mills goes from Orrington right down to
I have a map right there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks, Chief.
Basically speaking, to keep this short, this started back in like 1989 when I started here, and the ordinance was put into place. I do think that the ordinance itself has to be looked at, because if you read the ordinance, as Mrs. Johnson said, under number 2, section 10.402 allows any truck within state weight limits and hauling to and from a residential property. That's very vague to me. A residential property from where? I mean, anywhere? Is it? I mean, I don't mind. There's two sides of this. There's a business side to it, and then there's a taxpayer side. And some of the business people are taxpayers. Some of the business people own pits that they're hauling out of. They pay taxes. So I have no interest in either side of that. I just, from a law enforcement perspective, I think we need to clarify what the ordinance itself really means and be specific in what it means so that we can enforce it one way or the other. I mean, we are, in fact, out there enforcing it when we have time to do it, and when we get complaints, we go out there. We've spoken with all the trucking companies. We've worked very well together. There was a Jake brake issue. We dealt with that. So we are out there enforcing it, but the ordinance itself really needs to be looked at to be more specific of residential property. To me, for the taxpayers, residential property means in Bucksport, but it does not say that in this ordinance. So if I remember correctly, back almost 30 years ago now, the residential property was for like hauling gravel to a driveway or to the wood to a house or things of that nature, but it really doesn't specify that in here. And then there was a lot of talk about this 30 years ago, and I only know that because I was the one enforcing it when I first got hired. So they put me out back in the afternoon to stop every truck that was moving out there and see what they were doing. So I do think that needs to be looked at.
I was on the other end of the road.
What's that?
I was on the other end of the road.
Yeah, he was. He was on the other end of the road. So I do think it needs to be looked at. I do think it needs to be fair to everyone, including businesses and property owners, and I think there is a happy medium. I never realized until directing traffic one day that the trucks can do damage to roadways. And the only reason I know that is because I felt the road actually move when trucks go by you. And at first I was thinking this this can't be true at all, but it is true. And I never realized it until I was standing out there. But I do think it's something that needs to be looked at. And I realize people have to run businesses, have to make a living, and people have to live there. So it's not an easy situation to be in. But and like I said, we send people out there to enforce it weekly.
How many pits are there, Sean? I mean, I know the one at the end of Church Road.
There's one on the end of the Church Road. There is actually one off 46. There's 2 or 3 or 4 right in that area.
With the one on 46, I mean, they can haul on 46, right?
Well, it depends on if there's... Under this they could, but under seasonal posting they
Oh.
can't in certain times of the year when the state posts the roads. But
We post when the state
yeah, we
posts.
post when the orange signs when the state posts during the wet and muddy times of the year.
Are all the pits in question in Bucksport, or are they hauling out of pits and going through Bucksport to get where they're going?
I think a majority of them are in Bucksport. And that's what we discussed today, that some of those,
Pits are in the area of Church Road, right, Jim?
Church Road, and then you got, Sergeant has a pit down on the, Route 46. I think they used to go in there and shoot, actually.
yeah, there was one there,
Across
and then
from
there's
Long
one,
Pond, and then there's
Yeah,
one
but on,
that's, below
on-
the Apple Orchard going up Route 46 to
yeah, Billy Gray. Lamar Coons used to own that, but Billy
Right.
Gray owns
Billy
it now.
Gray has
He
one.
bought that, yeah.
There's another one down by Woody's.
But there's no signage about weight until, what, you get up to Central Street? There's nothing at the town line that I,
No.
No,
Well, there's state statutes that.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
There's state statutes that deal with weight limits
yeah.
on any roads.
But here, I live on Bucks Mills also, and we've got logging trucks with 3-axle trailers.
No, I mean, what the chief is saying is that, you know, if we want to look at the ordinance and change
Yeah,
that and
right.
Yeah,
post
all I'm
roads.
saying is,
Yeah.
it's not just an occasional dump truck, we've got the
Absolutely.
metal haulers, I mean, not the individual people running up
Well,
there.
and you'll see a lot of those under the orange sign postings they call seasonal posting.
Right.
There's certain stipulations in that law that need to be met, and it's actually below 32 degrees and no water in the cracks, which is crazy to me that, I mean, there's times where there's water in the cracks, it turns to 32, and we're out there looking to see if there's wet roads and all that stuff. So that's another side of seasonal posting is different in different
Yeah.
guidelines, but it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
different law, so.
But the issue is whether Bucks Mills and some of these roads are seeing an excess. You know, this is more than an occasional, it's becoming a shortcut, is what, it's my understanding, to and from the other end, that it, you know, that more so than it has in the past, that,
Well, if you figure the price of gas per gallon and the difference between going down 46 to do a job in Bangor versus coming through Bucks Mills Road and going over, or even Snow's Corner, when they did that job in Snow's Corner, for them to go down 46 or to come out and down 15, it's a lot further than it was to come down Bucks Mills Road.
It
So
is.
they're doing it because it's quicker, but, you know, it shouldn't be. I mean, that's why the state roads have regulations, because they're built for they can monitor that. I mean, they did a big study about the trucks on highways because they were having problems with infrastructure. It was done in 2010, but it was about them, you know, the bridges and the safety of the roads, and it's a lot of work that should be done to maintain them if you're going to allow the trucks to go on. Especially those 4-axle trucks that are filled to the load with stone or gravel, whatever it is that they put in them. I can't imagine what they must weigh. And they're 65 miles an hour down the hill past my house. I mean, it's dangerous.
And we do look at that also, if you read under number 2, I don't know if you have it in front of you, that the trucks that are exempt by that section have to get the shortest, most direct route from me, and we have to agree upon it so that we know where they are and it's the shortest route. So that is, she's exactly right, is depending on where the job site is and which pit they're hauling out of, they are taking the shortest route, obviously, because they're in business to make money and so on and so forth, so.
And we also have some businesses that have heavy trucking that are also in town, though, that you have to make sure
Yes.
that they can do
Yeah.
a certain, you know, to and from.
there's one trucker, there's at least one, isn't Gene Bass located
He is.
on the road?
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's, I wasn't gonna throw any names, but yeah.
Well, no,
yeah.
I'm not, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that we have a, that,
We have a
and
contractor on,
a contractor,
Right.
and then,
Is his pit
the-
there?
hmm?
Is his pit there? Does he have a pit?
no,
No,
but he hauls out
He
of,
hauled from the one years ago near the church road.
I think he's like stores loam and other product, and.
But then you have folks hauling backhoes,
Yeah.
you know, to and from properties,
Mhm.
you know, that have businesses. I mean, Gene has a backhoe, I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
doesn't he,
yeah,
that
he's
he's
got an
hauling?
excavator and a backhoe and yeah.
Bruce has a question.
Yeah, as a business in town, I occasionally get that type of truck in the road. And that's gonna make it hard for me for deliveries and stuff. And there's a neighbor of mine who won't be able to bring his equipment home or his truck.
Well, he can go 46.
He lives on Russell Hill Road, he can't go either way.
Well, they can travel to and from without a load under the ordinance, that is in the.
Yeah.
How do you get your equipment home with a truck?
That's what I'm saying, we have some home-based businesses, you know, I mean,
Right.
Sean's out on Central Street, and he's got the garage out there where he hauls stuff, so.
Mhm.
And Gene, I know, takes his stuff home. So I think it
That's
really,
a whole bunch of issues.
I think it really does have to look at the ordinance, and I know in other towns that they had roads posted, but they also had exceptions for people that had home-based businesses. And that cures the shortcuts to and from and trying to, you know, stay away from the state police way trucks,
Yeah,
which is why you travel the back roads.
sure.
I mean, it's not, I don't have an issue for going home at the end of the day. It's the 50 trucks a day that are going back and forth doing a job.
But I know there are other towns that had this sort of same issue with businesses in the town.
You don't want to stop them.
And there's variances and things you can do to do that. But I think we need to, I think the chief had it right. I think this ordinance was built when 395 was being built back in the late 80s.
Mhm.
There was reasons to do it.
So if there was some limitation that the roads are posted to overlimit unless the business is
Home base,
located,
the
it's a
business is
home,
based
it's
right
a,
there, yeah.
They would have an exception.
they would have, not to haul on it, but to get where they were
To
going.
and from.
Yep. And the shortest
Yeah,
distance.
without a load, which would include equipment, obviously, that you'd have to include equipment.
I was going to say, they have to be able to haul their stuff to where they're going, yeah.
But we can regulate not material, just equipment.
But I mean, if somebody's
Yeah, well,
building
the
a house
other
on
thing
Bucksville
that you
Road,
might
you're
have
gonna haul
is-
it back, or you're gonna have cement trucks going out there, so you can't, you know.
Well, and that's the thing too, that I just
With
mentioned, is
exceptions.
that I believe that the residential property was just for that, as Mr. Stewart just said, is that if you're building a house, they have to haul gravel, they have to haul concrete, they have to, I mean, technically speaking, there's gotta be an exemption, that, I believe this was residential properties in the town of Bucksport, but some business people totally disagree with me, which is okay also, I don't blame them, but I think that's what it was for, but I think it really needs to be clarified by definition what we're doing.
Could they get those exemptions as part of the building permit process?
I think they could, whichever way works for me is good, just so that,
And at least then it's one stop. and
Right.
You're going to
right.
be working
Yeah.
with so-and-so and.
Yeah, the,
I mean, we get notified
you
now if
have,
she gives a permit. she'll
you
call
have
and,
timber harvesting, that's an occasional event that could happen on one of these roads that would require,
and it has within the last year or so.
there have been some, I
Yeah.
know there have been some of those, and that's how they haul it wood out. They would, and for some, they got to get there to get it. There's not, if you totally exempt, if you don't, somebody who owned property on Bucks Mills who was having timber harvesting done or that kind of thing wouldn't be able to have it if there was no way for them to haul out.
But if you want to issue permit, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm saying,
Right.
but that's what I'm saying. There would need to be a provision for that kind of an activity to occur on a,
Yeah.
you know, so that the police would know that they were supposed to be out there
You
and
just can't exclude all heavy traffic from roads without having exceptions in there. I mean,
Right.
it's
with
not-
some way to do it. Jim has a, Mark?
Jim.
Sorry.
When I do a roofing job here in town, I have to come into the town office and get a permit for each individual roof that I do. Why would it be impossible for them to come in and get a permit to do a job and then get off the road? I can understand her feeling, noting her location, and, you know, she got herself as far away from the main line as she could, and bang, here comes truck after truck after truck, because they have jobs on Kings Mountain or on Center Drive in Orrington, which gives them the advantage of being able to put their bid down to a reasonable enough thing, that they don't have to go through 5 or 6 towns to go 2 miles. And I can understand, and they do, there was a truck that was going down through, and every time he went down through by my house, he had his gate break,
Shakes
And
the whole
when
house.
he'd get to her house, it would rattle with
I
a
think
coffee
we
cup.
discussed
So
that with him, though. I think it stopped after a bit, once we found him.
That has ceased. And I think at the present time, there are actually two companies that are hauling back and forth, they're hauling gravel, and we get occasional logging trucks. But I do know that right after they redid the road between her house and mine, when they did that stretch coming up that hill, it was for a long time, there was mud that deep in there, and they finally got it covered back over. And within a 6-month period, they started harvesting wood where all of that, those new homes are in that subdivision. And they were loading the wood right on the side of the road right at the end of where Tony Valinotti's driveway is. And for a long time, you had to drive through a dip in the road, but them trucks sat there and just kept working their way down further and further. That's the kind of damage that I don't want to see out there, any more of that. If you're driving along and there goes your front end every time you go through that dip. And they've gone out and put new hot top in it. As far as any other damage goes, I don't see it as a great amount, but I think that each individual job that they're doing, they should come in. If they're gonna use our roads, they should get permitted ahead of time, and we should probably send someone up to say, roads look fine, they're done, now we have a problem, you know?
So if we did a permit requirement for logging or some sort of activity on one of these roads, and an exemption for home-based businesses located on
In
such
Bucksport,
roads
yeah.
in Bucksport to get back and forth where, to and from work. Other exemptions are the kind of exemptions we have for weight limit, electrical repair vehicles, fuel trucks, deliveries, those kind of things are also.
Those life safety things are exempt all the
That's
time
right,
anyway. whether
are
they're supposed to or
exempted,
not.
though that would be written in, and just change this to where the permit requirement is that it's a prohibition except for these exemptions, and the permit for wood harvesting, the
For
normal
Bucksport
list of things.
residents type
Hmm?
things. For the Bucksport resident type things is what would need permit.
For Bucksport residents to do what the permit exemptions we're talking about would be for something that somebody in Bucksport with property in that area needed to get to.
Would it ban the ones that are going into Orrington then? It would totally ban them. Okay.
Well, they wouldn't, unless they were an oil truck that delivered on something and kept going into Orrington, that kind of thing, but not a Snow's Corner
Bucksport as a
job.
pass-through.
Not as a pass-through.
I think what you're looking to ban is pass-through transport. That doesn't have an indefinite destination.
Within the municipality, yeah.
Well, it has a it starts at a pit here and goes somewhere else,
Well,
but
we
it
have to
has
be
no
careful though,
other.
because if there's somebody coming from Dedham, they've got to be able to come to their job in Bucksport. So it can't just be, it's the person that's having the work done. Is that what we're saying? That's the person that needs to have the permit to allow a heavy vehicle to come in. whether that vehicle's
The other
coming
thing to remember is that we have taxpayers in the town that own a lot of property, that have a lot of pits in them, and they sell gravel to everybody, so you gotta be very careful how we do this, because I think of both sides of it, I really do, and someone that pays taxes on a lot of property and has a lot of gravel pits in town that sells gravel to someone that's out of town, how are we gonna regulate that? Because they make money off that too, I mean, and that, for some of it, that's why some of them, I know for a fact, bought the property they bought.
Sure.
Because they're in that type of business also, and they use the gravel, but they sell it also, so I'd ask you to keep that in mind for the other side of it.
46 and 15 or 4?
I mean, can each pit be told how they've got to get back to, unless they're transporting to a job itself?
Yeah.
then you have.
What
you're
I'm
gonna have
happy
a-
to
you're gonna have
do
a serious
is
enforcement issue.
take a
Trying to
look
figure it out.
at some other communities and how they've addressed this issue, because it isn't limited to Bucksport, and come back at your next meeting with some suggested amendments to this to try and more closely regulate what is happening there. The second thing that Mrs. Johnson had asked about was the speed limit on Buxley Mills, which is currently 45 miles an hour. And I got an update because I sent that request for an evaluation to the state, which is a two-edged sword. It can go up, it can go down, or stay the same. And received that 7 miles of that road has already been evaluated and designated over time. Now, they may look at it again, but they're depending on the nature of traffic. But I have this information that I just got this afternoon that I'll send out to you. I gave Mrs. Johnson a copy of it as well, so we could see.
And I counted the access points. There's 17 that have been, most of them have been new within the last few years. From the top of from Drescher Road down, all those new homes, I think on both sides there's 17 access points. And I was thinking that would be the reason to lower it down.
To take a look at it. Well, I believe that they're going to do that. They do the study and then we get the information.
And that same concern is expressed by the large percentage of the people along that stretch. It's not just one person.
Well, as I said, I relayed that to DOT in a request for an evaluation, and they sent me back this information and forwarded it to the Bangor office for doing the evaluation. So.
And that just, I'm on a committee in Orland, Castine, and Penobscot on Route 15 on the Castine Road, and they had the same thing done, and they actually got a higher speed limit that was authorized for the road. So
It can go both
it can go
ways.
both ways, like Sue said.
That's what happened in Colebrook Road.
Yep.
But so if we schedule another meeting prior to your next council meeting, I can have some other community information and a draft of what it might look like if we shrunk this down to, and are we talking about all of these roads or just?
I think if you do one, you have to
Bucks
do them
Mills.
all, because you've got.
Okay. Alrighty then.
And as Peter said, I would keep in mind the enforcement aspects of it too, because if you regulate it too much, then no one's going to move. I mean, they just aren't, so I just try to keep it in mind when you do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
second?
Was that Bermuda?